All right, so good morning again, everyone. Thank you for joining us and welcome to the National Army Museum. Let me introduce you to our museum educator, Anthony Orlakoff.
Well, hello, everyone. Good morning. Good morning. Again, my name is AJ Orlakoff, and I'm an educator at the National Museum of the United States Army. And I just like to thank everyone for attending this morning. And today, I'm really privileged to get to talk about one of my favorite topics, and that's the Civil War. The Civil War. And specifically, I want to talk about a particular subset of the Civil War. We've had all these great book talks throughout Civil War Week. We've had a lot of great programs, but this program focuses more on the soldiers and specifically what we call the soldier's load. And that is, in short, the weapons, equipment, clothing, uniform items that a soldier carries with them into battle, campaigning, etc., etc. So we're going to be talking about today, and I actually have some examples of these things that the soldiers carried with me. So we're going to talk about that. But before that, we're going to go over a little bit of basics on the Civil War, just so we're all on the same page. And because this is a virtual field trip, it's not just a lecture. I'm not just going to be up here talking you to death. Please go ahead. I'm going to have a lot of questions for the audience as we go through. Please answer those questions in the chat box. If you have questions during the program that are not a direct question I am asking, please go ahead and put those questions in using the Q&A tab, and we'll try to get to them at the end of the program. So at that, I think it's time to start talking about the Civil War. So the first thing I want to talk about is that when you think of the Civil War, when I say the words, the Civil War, what are a few things that immediately come into your mind? What are some things that immediately just pop into your head when I say the Civil War? North versus South, that's a great one. Gettysburg, right? Largest battle to ever occur in North America. Anything else? Brother against brother. Ah, yes. Fight against slavery. Grant Lincoln leaders. Oh, huge death tolls. That's a great one. Y'all have such great answers. Wow. Y'all are an incredibly knowledgeable audience. I'm very happy about that. Y'all already know a ton about the Civil War. But I want to really focus in on something that one commenter did say, and it's one thing that I always like to think about when I think about the Civil War. It's actually the deadliest conflict in American history. Think about that. Of all the conflicts and wars America's been involved in, the Civil War is the deadliest. Over 600,000 people are going to die of various causes during the Civil War. And really, when you view it in that light, the Civil War is an American tragedy. How did it come to this? How do we get North versus South? How do we get this such high death toll in the Civil War? So does anybody know, just thinking off the top of their head, as we talk about the Civil War, as we're talking about this death toll and high things, what caused this? What caused the Civil War? Can anyone tell me what is the main or primary cause of the Civil War, the central cause? What do you think? I see a few answers already. I can't get past anything past y'all. Y'all are a very knowledgeable audience. That's right. The main or central cause of the Civil War is slavery. There are other causes, right? And that's why I more say the central cause, not the only cause. It's a very complicated situation, but it's the primary or central cause. Now, let's break this down. I think this is worth breaking down why slavery causes this conflict. Okay, so let's actually do this with images, okay? So I'm going to show you an image of the North that represents the North around the time of the Civil War. Civil War is North versus South. And I'm going to show you this photo, this image of the North. What do you notice about this image? What do you see here? What is this image? What is this depicting? What do you think? Y'all are super knowledgeable. That's right. This is a factory. This is a factory in the North around the time of the Civil War. You can see here we have the smokestacks here. It's industrial, right? So this image represents the Northern economy during the Civil War. So the North makes goods in factories. That gives them an industrial economy. That's how they make their money. That's their way of life, okay? So that's the North's way of life. They have an industrial economy. Let's do the same thing with the South. This is the South around the time of the Civil War. Let's take a look at this image. What do you notice about this image? What are we seeing here? Farms, great. Agriculture, absolutely agricultural, good. Does anyone know what we would call this specific type of farm? Oh, steamship, great, there is one in the background there. Ah, someone said it, yes. This is a plantation. And on a and plantations are essentially large farms where you grow cash crops to sell. So the South has a farming economy, or otherwise known as an agricultural economy. And that's how they make their money. That's their way of life. And to the people in the South, they believe that enslaved people are integral to this economy and this way of life. So they view any attack on the institution of slavery as an attack not on just slavery, it's on them directly. That's how they view it. I'm not saying it's right, that's how they view it. So these differences between North and South over slavery are going to boil over in the election of 1860. The election of this man. Of course, we all know him, right? This is Abraham Lincoln, 16th president of the United States. And he actually runs for president in 1860 as a candidate for the Republican Party. It's a new party then. And their platform is an anti-slavery platform. Okay. Now, they don't want to wipe slavery out in one big blow, but what they do want to do is contain slavery to the South, stop its growth, and contain it, and then slowly phase it out and get rid of it over time. That's the Republican platform. That's what they want to do. The South sees this and sees the election of Abraham Lincoln as a direct attack on them and their economy, whether it's right or wrong. And as a result, 11 Southern states are going to secede eventually from the United States and form their own nation, the Confederacy. And look, you don't have to take my word for it about slavery, because the Confederates that were around back then, they wrote about it, and they gave speeches about it, and they talked about why they felt that slavery was the cause, what they felt their war would be over, and their cause was. Their vice president, Alexander Stephens, said this in a speech: "Our new government is founded upon the great truth that the Negro is not equal to the white man, that slavery's subordination to the superior race is his natural and normal condition. This, our new government, is the first in the history of the world based upon this great physical, philosophical, and moral truth." So slavery causes the secession from the United States, at least it was for Alexander Stephens. It causes the secession of the United States. And for the Army, this presents a huge problem, because the Army has forts throughout the entire South, which is now, they're now saying they're a new nation. And the South doesn't like that all these forts have Army garrisons. And the most important of these forts, at least to the Confederates, is Fort Sumter. It's located at the mouth of Charleston, which is their most important, one of their most important ports. And so basically the Army garrison there, they order that the garrison should leave and surrender. The garrison refuses. And as a result, on April 12th, 1861, Confederate forces are going to open fire on Fort Sumter, firing the first shots of the deadliest conflict in American history here at Fort Sumter. So again, the Army has a big problem here because they now have to fight a war. Okay, they have to fight a war they were not necessarily prepared to fight, but they had a lot of very experienced generals from prior wars, and the most experienced among them was this man, Lieutenant General Winfield Scott, one of the most storied soldiers in American history. And he's an old man by the time of the Civil War, but he's still extremely smart. And so him and Lincoln, the Lincoln administration and Army leadership, they study a map of the United States, and they come up with a plan to defeat the Confederacy. They take a look at this map, and they notice all the water. They notice the water surrounding the Confederacy. They know all the rivers that are actually going through the Confederacy. They see all this. So they see all this water, and they basically, Winfield Scott sees an opportunity for the Army and the Navy to work together. So basically, you have the Army, you have the Navy blockading the coastline. This is Winfield Scott's plan. The Navy to blockade the coastline, to interdict these rivers, and then for the Army to play offense and defense to attack key points in the Confederate states. You can see them right in here, to attack key points, and then also to defend the North from attack, to defend the North. So the Navy blockading the Confederacy, and then the Army attacking and defending. This plan is dubbed the Anaconda Plan, because the idea is to squeeze the South into submission. So that is the plan. That is the plan. And they need soldiers to execute this plan as well. Can't fight a war without soldiers. So Lincoln calls for volunteers, and hundreds of thousands are going to enlist. And the Civil War is a mostly volunteer force. The draft is used later in the war, but they are mostly volunteers. They mostly come from farming communities in the North. They have an average age of about 24. And, how joining up for the Civil War goes is, have you ever joined up with a sports team, with church or your neighborhood, a softball team, something like that, something recreational, anything like that, and how you're going with groups of people from your neighborhood and going to do that? Well, that's kind of how the Civil War enlisting went, is that you would get a bunch of your friends and neighbors, you would form together and you'd form what's called a regiment, and you would procure your uniforms, you would get all your supplies, and then you would get instated into the army, and then you would be placed under a commander. So again, that's sort of how enlisting worked, is you can kind of think about it kind of like a softball league, except you're going to war. So this is the 110th Pennsylvania. We have the 4th United States Colored Troops. Again, we have a lot of soldiers coming into service. Most had never served before. And again, these soldiers, it's going to be up to these men to execute the Army's mission of attacking and defending and holding up their end of the Anaconda Plan. So let's take a look now, and I have some help here from a friend to really look at what exactly the Civil War soldiers' load actually looks like. So let's see what my friend here has to say. Start playing here in a second.
Hello, my name is Tony, and I'm an educator here at the National Museum of the United States Army. Today I'm here to talk to you about the Civil War soldiers' load, or the weapons, uniform, and equipment the Civil War soldiers wore during battle. First, we'll take a look at my uniform. This is the typical uniform a Civil War soldier would have worn during the war. My uniform is mostly made of wool and has 4 main pieces: my forage cap, sack coat, sky blue trousers, and Brogan boots. Along with my uniform, I also carried a variety of other objects, including my weapon, which was a rifled musket, my food and many personal items, which I carried in my haversack, as well as my knapsack, which I took with me on marches, which carried my blanket, spare clothing, and my shelter. As you can see, the Civil War soldier carried a variety of items and needed to be well equipped to face the harsh conditions they faced on and off the battlefield.
Okay, well, thanks to my friend there, you have a sense of what the soldier's load looked like, fully put together. So you said it weighs about 50 pounds. What did everyone notice about the soldier's load, seeing it on him there? What did everyone notice? What are some things you saw? What are some things you saw? Yes, very bulky. Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of equipment. It's a lot of straps. It's a lot of different bags. Yeah, not ergonomic, at least by our standards, right? Very good, very good, very good observation. Yes, that's a big one. It is not a very comfortable uniform. It is not a very comfortable uniform. It gets, too hot in the summer. It's not warm enough in the winter. It is not it's very, very grueling for soldiers to wear these uniforms. So again, a much different mindset to how we approach this kind of stuff today. Okay, good. Ooh, not waterproof? Hold that thought. Hold that thought. We'll get to it. Good, good. Well, let's take a look inside and see actually what's in some of these bags too. We got another part here for my friend here.
Hello again. Now that I've explained what the Civil War soldier wore, I'm here to give a more in-depth look at the items that the Civil War soldier carried. When going into battle, the soldier only took with them what they needed to fight. This included, of course, their weapon, a rifled musket, which could have a bayonet attached to it for close quarters combat. They also had a cartridge box, which contained their ammunition, as well as a cap pouch, which contained caps that allowed the weapon to fire. Now, when not in battle, soldiers had a variety of other objects that they carried with them, including a canteen, which was very important because it stored their water and that soldiers carried with them almost at all times, as well as a cup, silverware, plates, and even food like coffee that soldiers would keep in their haversack. Now, when on the march, soldiers had to carry many bulky items as well. This they would keep in their knapsack. The knapsack contains items such as spare clothing, frying pans, tent shelter, and even your blanket. In all, this roughly weighed about 50 pounds. And even though soldiers had a lot of items that they needed to carry, they were all very essential in allowing the soldier to succeed both on and off the field.
All right, well, there you go. I think we do all, at least that gives us a baseline for what all this looks like applied and fully on somebody. But I have actually, what I've done is I've pulled a few of the items that I find particularly interesting that I really want to focus on. Because I think we fall into this paradigm with the Civil War, or really anything from the past, where when we think about it, we think back and we look back on these people and we say, oh man, they were forever ago. Their equipment was so antiquated. Oh, why did they fight like that? You know, it's just such ancient history. We do it so much better today. And they know, and that's understandable why we might think like that, right? Because a lot of our things today are better because we benefited from technological innovations that have occurred since then. However, the Civil War soldier, we need to take the past on their terms, not on our terms. And so the Civil War soldier, if you look at it on their terms, they're a really high-tech soldier. They have a lot of advanced equipment that soldiers in prior conflicts, such as the American Revolution, War of 1812, Mexican-American War, that they wish they would have had. So again, you have this really highly advanced equipment that the Civil War soldier is using. So I want to actually focus, I have some examples of those with me, of these technological innovations that really influence how soldiers fought and how soldiers executed the Army's mission. So at that, let's look at some of these let's look at some of this stuff. All right, let me make sure I remember that. Okay, all right, we can see myself full screen there. Let's take a look at some of this equipment. Okay, I think a logical place to start is with the primary weapon. So this is a rifled musket. It is the primary weapon system for a Civil War soldier. This is a model 1858 Enfield musket. It is actually the second most common musket used by both sides during the Civil War. And we see it, we look at a musket, oh, our firearms are so much better. But this is actually extremely technologically advanced for the time. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about this. Now, muskets are not new. They had used them in prior conflicts. They had used them in the American Revolution. They had been used years prior, the War of 1812 and all that. But really, this musket is much different because it is not smoothbore. And what smoothbore means is those muskets that I talked about in the Revolution. That means that the inside of this barrel here, the inside of it is actually smooth. Not this one, but on a smoothbore musket, the inside is smooth. Okay, and that is going to actually create a very short range for this musket of about effective range of about 50 to 80 yards, not very long at all. There is a huge technological innovation in the 1840s that is going to change everything here. And I have it right here. It's right here. It's small. This is the Manet ball. The Manet ball is a special type of bullet fired by a rifled musket. It makes it more accurate and it makes it deadlier. So really to explore this, I think a good way to sort of get this across is, has anyone here a fan of sports? Anyone here a football fan? Because you can think of a Manet ball kind of like a football. So someone in chat help me out here. When you throw a football and you're throwing it, is it standing still when you throw it? Is it just kind of flopping through the air? Is it just doing that, or what's going on with the football when it goes through the air? That's right, it spins, spiral, right? Absolutely. And that spin, that spiral, when a quarterback throws it, is going to impart a lot of accuracy because of the physics of how it moves. So you can think of a Manet ball kind of like a football, at least the way it moves through the air. So how it spins, and the spin, as I said, gives it greater accuracy. So if you're taking a look here at the Manet ball, I'll hold it up to the screen for you to see. You can actually see, and you can see on the in my presentation here too, you can see the series of grooves in the Manet ball. And what that does is it catches on a series of grooves inside the musket called rifling. And it catches onto those grooves The bullet catches onto the grooves and then imparts spin. And this is going to almost double the range of the musket. We go from an effective range of 50 to 80 yards to an effective range of 150, sometimes even 200 yards. This is going to make combat in the Civil War deadlier than in prior conflicts. Okay, and again, the musket is not the only component to this weapon system. We have a few more. I'll show you here real quick. We actually have a cartridge box here. So this is going to contain the ammunition, cartridges. It's going to contain packages of paper called cartridges that have a Manet ball in them like that. And they're also going to have gunpowder inside the paper. I want you to take a look in there and see. Can you see how it's metal? Why do you think, see, it's black leather, but why do you think this would be metal on the inside? Why? Why would you want to have metal on the inside right there? What do you think? Ah, yes, to stay dry. Good, good. What happens if we're in battle and there's a stray spark? Yeah, this metal is actually going to protect our cartridges from water, but more importantly, sparks, because we don't want all of our ammunition and gunpowder blowing up during combat. You don't want that at all. Okay, so that's what we see. It's metal here. You also have a cap pouch, which is kept on their belt, and this is going to contain their caps that are required to fire the musket. These caps are actually extremely advanced. They're full of an element called fulminated mercury. So, I mean, I'll open it up. I don't have any caps here, but again, inside this pouch, you can see it's very protected as well from sparks or anything like that. And inside here, the caps will go, and those caps, the small caps, are how the musket fires. It uses a very explosive element called fulminated mercury. And so that's a very advanced thing of the musket. And then we do have something low tech, but it is still a deadly weapon. We have a bayonet. Bayonet, it essentially is going to turn your musket into a giant spear. So again, that is maybe the low tech part of it. But again, this is a highly, highly advanced weapon system. Highly, highly advanced weapon system. And again, this is going to create very deadly combat situations for the Civil War soldier. I think one of the greatest examples of this is at the Battle of Gettysburg. I know some of y'all mentioned it before. And so at Gettysburg, you're going to have, it's the largest battle to ever occur in North America ever. And, at Gettysburg, you're going to have an event on the third day of the battle, July 3rd, 1863, called Pickett's Charge. The Confederate commander, Robert E. Lee, is going to order a charge of the Union center, and the Union commander, General Meade, as some of you may have learned about from our Civil War book talk on Monday. Meade is a very good commander, and he anticipates this. He has his troops in the right position, and Pickett's charge is going to roll across open ground into a buzzsaw of rifled muskets and cannons. You can see here a little bit of the details. You can see here that the open field and the Confederates coming in. And again, you can see the Union forces. I mean, they just absolutely let loose with the wall of lead on these attacking Confederates. It is devastating. I'll read a quote from someone who was there. This is from Lieutenant Colonel Franklin Sawyer with the 8th Ohio, talking about the Confederates being hit by this fire. They are at once enveloped in a dense cloud of smoke and dust. Arms, heads, blankets, guns, and knapsacks were thrown and tossed into the clear air. A moan went up from the field distinctly to be heard amid the storm of battle. So the rifle musket is very, very powerful on the defensive, particularly, and that's proven at Gettysburg and so many other battles, as we have a very high casualty rate in a lot of these frontal assaults. It's not that frontal assaults can't work, it's that they're often not executed well enough, and the rifled musket makes these poorly executed assaults pay. They make them pay for it. So about half those men, 12,500 men, about half of them are going to be killed or wounded during Pickett's charge. Devastating indeed. Okay, let's shift gears here to something else. Let's talk about, let's just say you're a soldier during the Civil War. You're marching along, and all of a sudden it starts raining, and you're marching along. Is that going to be a good thing? Is that going to be a good thing for water and other things to get on all your stuff? Yeah, right. No, nobody wants that, right? No, that's a soldier's worst nightmare. Is not the enemy necessarily. Sometimes it's water. You don't want water to get anywhere, especially on all of your things that you would carry. Like, you're going to carry a lot of things: spare blankets, spare clothes, food, all that kind of stuff. You don't want that getting wet. So, thankfully for the Civil War soldier, they are going to have a waterproof system for carrying many of these items. You see here, we have the knapsack right here, and they also have the haversack. So let me go ahead and talk about the knapsack here first. So again, you can see the knapsack right here. Again, I'm going to go ahead and open it up in here, but as you can see it sort of in a. Let me go ahead and make my screen smaller so you can see. You can see here again, it's it is waterproofed. You can see here is that waterproofing is a huge, important technological innovation that occurs before the Civil War that they didn't have in prior wars. And again, soldiers want to keep their stuff from getting wet, and the knapsack is going to allow them to do that. So let's take a look at some of the stuff. Go ahead and open it up here for you. You can see what it looked like when they carried. So again, inside here you would have, again, these are pretty standard. They're issued to most Union soldiers, and they are quite uncomfortable, unfortunately. But again, what's not so much important as comfort as it is for functionality. So you see they would carry, now each Civil War soldier would have their own method for carrying artifacts like this, but we looked up what a few reenactors do, and you can see here they have their blanket in the middle because they want to keep that the driest. You don't want a wet blanket. Then you'd have these side pockets here, and in these side pockets, I can go ahead and undo them here. You have a variety of equipment. In here, we actually have our tent half, our canvas tent half. I'm going to leave that there. And then over here, as I switch it, we have something very, very important that every soldier will want to have, and that is their gum blanket. So gum blanket, as you can see, it's sort of like a long sheet. Let me switch cameras here so you can see it a little bit closer. You can see here, it's pretty large if I pull it all the way out. Again, it's called a gum blanket, and it essentially is kind of what it sounds like. It's a rubber blanket. It's called a gum blanket, but it's essentially a rubber blanket. And how it's made is actually you take a strip of cotton or linen, and you're going to coat it in this special rubber called vulcanized rubber. It's going to be this process where you mix sulfur with raw rubber and heat it and bake it onto the side of this. And this is actually going to turn a regular blanket of cotton or linen into a quite waterproof blanket. Now, the main reason they want these gum blankets, these waterproofs, are for something dry to sleep on. That's going to be one of the main things that they want. But also, if I hold it up close, you can see they have grommets here on the end. So those can be used tied, or sometimes they would even put a hole right in the middle to turn your gum blanket into a poncho. So they have the gum blanket poncho. And again, this is going to be extremely important for soldiers because they want to keep dry when they're marching. So I have an excellent quote here, actually, to show you the gum blanket in action. Here. Come back to that in a second. So again, we have a quote here from Captain Wilbur F. Hinman. You can see here, this is not Captain Hinman, but you can see again his a photo here. It's actually a knapsack with the gum blanket. You can actually see it rolled up right there. And he said, and this is an account he wrote after the war. It's a fictional account in his book, but it is pretty representative of how soldiers felt at the time. They were mighty good to spread on the ground under your blanket. Wet won't soak through the rubber. And when you're marching in the rain, it beats an umbrella. So that is our gum blanket. And again, soldiers want to arrive and camp at night dry. They want to sleep on something dry. We can all relate to that. So the gum blanket is a very, very important technological innovation enjoyed by soldiers during the war. So talked about waterproofing as far as large items. Let's shift gears into something that's even more relatable to us, and that's food. So this is actually the method, the haversack. It's much smaller. And here, I'll switch so you can see it on me. You can see the size of it. You can see it's pretty small, you know, and it's carried sort of on the side like this. You can kind of, and soldiers are actually going to have this a lot with them. You can kind of think this as like a backpack or fanny pack or something that they're going to have on them quite often. And so if I open, this is actually going to be their primary method for carrying food and small personal items. So if you take a look right here, you can see it is also black. It is painted in tar and linseed oil to protect it from water. And now haversacks were not new. Again, this was something that was used in the Revolution. The big innovation is the waterproofing, the water resistance, because this tar and linseed oil is going to keep moisture out of our food, out of our letters home, out of things that you do not want to get wet. So let's open it up. Again, just like with the knapsack, you're going to have a very personalized way of keeping all of these items together. So this is just a configuration that we came up with. You see, they would often have a plate. They would have their cup they would carry with their canteen or in their haversack. They would have various bags of food. See here, they would have other bags of food. They have like forks and knives in this bag right here. We have some food. We have a plate, and you can see there's actually a lining in the haversack too. You can actually see that lining there, so they can keep food separate from letters home or something like that they don't want to get their food on. Okay, so again, that's the haversack. It's going to be a pretty advanced method for carrying their food, at least prior to the Revolution. But I want to talk more about food in general. Does anyone know what Civil War soldiers ate? What was the most common food that Civil War soldiers made? What do you think? And let me go ahead and let me give you a closer look at that. Sorry, I forgot to stop sharing my screen. There, you should be able to see it better again. We have the plate here. We have various bags. We have the haversack here. And then I'll show you the inside again. You can see here there's a separate lining to keep your food separate from everything else. But when I talk about food in general, what are some things you think of when I just say food? What do you think? Oh, I see everybody's already answering it. Wonderful, wonderful. So yes, those are all great examples. Coffee, salted meat, hardtack, y'all are getting all the big ones right there. But I want to talk about the main staples of their diet, because they're most often going to be eating two things, at least for Union soldiers, because when they're campaigning, they're oftentimes deep into enemy territory. They have to be fed. The army has to keep them fed while they're campaigning, dozens of miles deep, possibly in the wilderness. So the only food that's really going to make it there, unless you're foraging it, is going to be hardtack and coffee. Hardtack and coffee. So it's a very famous book as well. So I have some hardtack here with me. You can actually make it at home. It's not that hard to make it at home. But as you can see, it resembles just like a thick cracker type material, and the name implies, it is very, very hard. Very hard. So hard, in fact, that you can't even eat it without soaking it in some type of liquid, such as coffee or brine or bacon grease or something like that. Okay, you could not be eaten raw. You're going to break your teeth in half. Now, why? Why did they make it this hard? The people of the past knew how to make soft bread. So that's not the issue. The issue with this is that they're making it hard on purpose to make it durable enough that it can be eaten in the field. It's not going to spoil. It's not going to go bad. Again, this is stuff that we don't really appreciate, because we have refrigeration. We have all MREs. We have all sorts of great ways to eat food in the field. But Civil War soldiers didn't have those advantages. Okay, so they had to use what they had. Okay, they had to use what they had, and they had hardtack. They knew it would last. They knew it would give soldiers something. But as you can imagine, hardtack is quite a poor food choice. It was not well liked by soldiers at all. So again, and I think this is something that's best said by Civil War soldier themselves. So I have another good quote here. So again, this is from, you can see here, we have a camp scene from the Civil War. You know, these photos are actually quite rare to get candid photos of like a camp scene like this. We have one right here. You can see, you know, mealtime is big. You know, mealtime is a huge deal. Food could be a huge morale boost, even hardtack if you have nothing. So Private William Woodland of the 8th United States Colored Troops, he said, "Nothing for breakfast this morning but coffee. The rations were issued this afternoon, and we were once more in good spirits with plenty to eat." So again, don't underestimate the humble haversack and how important it was for soldiers to sustain combat operations. And both the haversack and the knapsack are technological advancements and innovations that are going to allow soldiers to sustain campaigns in a much more effective way in the field. Okay, are they great necessarily by our standards? No, but as with a lot of these items, it's better than nothing, and it's better than what soldiers prior had. Okay, remember, Civil War soldiers are high-tech soldiers, and they have some high-tech bags to do the job. All right, so let's shift gears again. Let's shift gears again. Let's talk about something else. Okay, so perhaps even something even easier to overlook than food and how important that is are these bad boys. That's right, shoes. Shoes are really, really important during the Civil War because after all, how can you execute the Army's mission? How can you fight in battle if you can't even get to the battlefield? And you know, soldiers, unless you're an officer or cavalry and you're riding a horse, or maybe you get lucky with a wagon or something, or occasionally a train, you know, you're going to be getting there by your feet. And you know, Civil War soldiers, they have to march sometimes 10 to 12 miles a day on average while they're campaigning. I mean, goodness, that's like walking around a track field 40 times. And you know, you're doing this with 50 pounds of equipment, by the way. So let me give you a closer look at these. I want to ask, what do you notice? I want to ask you to please compare these shoes to ones that we use today. Go ahead and take a look at them. Compare or contrast them to shoes we have today. What's different about them? Ooh, I think someone is already on it. What do you think? Yeah, they're thinner. They're pretty rigid, absolutely. Yes, they are made of leather, very good. So they are going to be kind of durable because they are made of leather. That's actually a good strength to them. Ah, someone said it, that's right. So again, we do not have a left and a right for these shoes. So these shoes, these boots are called Brogans. Brogan comes from Brogan is an Irish term these were originally invented and they're first used in battle by the English. And again, like they're made of leather. So again, they are pretty durable. You can actually see here, I forgot to show you something right here. Let me switch back. You can see here actually that the soles are nailed in right there. And you do see it's made of leather. So again, pretty good, much better than what they had during the Revolution. The English had used them for a while, but by the time of the Civil War, you're getting the United States is able to get some of this equipment the English had used for years and years and years. And so this is going to be a big, big improvement over shoes they had in the Revolution because it's leather, it's pretty durable. However, does that mean they're good by our standards? No, they are not. I mean, y'all pointed it out right away. We do not have left and right shoes, left and right feet. So these are going to be extremely, extremely uncomfortable. A few of us have even tried these on. They are not comfortable at all. They're extremely uncomfortable. So again, just because something is good not good by our standards, it could be good by their standards. But even though by their standards, for the Army standards and the mission they needed to accomplish, the Brogan boots do not perform very well, and mostly for one simple reason, and that is their mortal enemy, mud. That's right, mud. Most Civil War roads are dirt back then, and if it rains and you're campaigning, you're going to have tens of thousands of troops, thousands of horses, wagons, cannons going over these roads, and it's going to turn these roads into just an absolute muck-filled mess. Okay, so these Brogans, they are no match for the mud. I actually have an image here from the very infamous, I should say, mud march that occurred in January 1863. You can see here the rains coming down. This is a contemporary image. You can see the rains coming down. You can see again, they're trying to march through the mud. It's not marching through snow. They're marching through mud and like a thunderstorm. And you can see that relayed here. And so again, these are no match for mud. And in fact, you know, it's just the Brogan. It's not high enough. You're just going to have mud slip into the sides. So you're not going to be a happy camper when this happens. And I have a quote here from Charles Lynch of the 18th Connecticut. While the weather is fine, the mud is very thick and plenty of it. A large quantity will stick to one's feet, or rather to our army brogans as we attempt to walk. This all comes in the life of a soldier. We are not serving our country for pleasure. So indeed, even to the soldiers back then, not very comfortable. Better than what they had in the Revolution? Absolutely yes. Technological innovation? Absolutely yes. A good, well-performing combat shoe or boot? No, it was not. It was not. But it was better, and it was better than nothing. So it could be said that a good shoe is only as good as the socks you have. Maybe there is something to that, because you can see here's some socks we had during the Civil War, and even more humble than the shoe, the sock is actually one of the more valued components in the Civil War soldiers' load because of how important they were. Because a sock keeps your foot dry. Wet feet are the enemy of every soldier from all time, every soldier of all time. So again, no soldier wants wet feet, because wet feet means disease and injury on the march. And if you're diseased and injured, that's going to affect your ability to fight. The Army cannot have this. So they do issue a lot of socks. The problem is there's a sock shortage during the war because they're hard to come by. Even though they're only simple, they're made of wool, they're just simple long socks. But again, soldiers are using these all the time. You saw the problems with the mud there. They're changing them a lot. They're getting damaged, and they're going through them so quickly they can't replenish them quick enough. So actually, one of the most common sources of socks during the war are going to be from women on the home front. Is that during the World War II, we always talk about how we have this infusion of women to the workforce and for the time, non-traditional spaces. Well, this occurs during the Civil War as well, is that you have all these farms and businesses in the North vacated of men, and you have women going to the workplace. They run farms, they operate businesses, they operate mills. They're doing a lot of this work that men were doing before. And they're also supporting the war effort in any way they can. And especially if they had a husband or a son in the Army at the time, they're going to be making them things like this. What do they want? Well, they need socks. Not so much what they want, but they need. They need socks. They need bandages. They need all sorts of things that are going to allow them to maintain their ability to fight and operate in the field, and just give them a modicum of comfort. Again, socks, mittens, bandages, all that kind of stuff. So again, easy to overlook the sock, but the sock and the Brogan, unsung hero of the Civil War. Absolutely. And they were advanced for the time. All right, I think we have about time for one more. And I got to say, y'all, it's my favorite. So let me show you. This is a sword from the Civil War. Now, I know what y'all are thinking. A sword? You got to be kidding me. You're here talking up here about technological innovations and you pull out a sword? How does that make any sense? Didn't they use guns? I know you're thinking that. Bear with me. Because the sword is used quite often during the Civil War. It's not a technological innovation. Swords had been around for thousands and thousands of years. But the Civil War is a combination of old and new. So you have these new technological innovations mixing in with old school technologies of the sword. So really, as much as I'd like to tell you that, we just had so many battles in the Civil War where guys are just hacking each other apart with swords, that did not happen. Look, only about 2% of all casualties during the Civil War are caused by an edged weapon or a sharp weapon, be that a bayonet, a knife, a sword, things like that. So they're not used in combat often. But this sword in particular is actually a potent symbolic weapon because it's used by an officer. Okay, so let me explain. It's a symbolic weapon that is used to amplify and symbolize an officer's authority on the battlefield. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the sword. This is a model 1850 field officer sword. It is a saber, and we can tell it's a saber because of the curve, and you can see the curve right there. It is single edged, so that means this end is sharp, this end is not, and it's designed as a slashing weapon to be used on horseback. That when a soldier goes by on horse, they can slash and cut. It's actually been used for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years on horseback in Europe, and even prior to that, if my research is correct. So again, like not a new technology at all. But as I go up closer, it's an officer's sword. Do y'all see how ornate that is? See, we have the squiggly lines in there. That's called foliage. You can see the US right there. You can see how ornate it is. Look at the guard right here. You can see, again, a lot of these details. It's like, it's very ornate, very fancy. So again, this is meant for an officer, and it's not meant to literally slash at people. It's meant to be a symbolic weapon. So to explain this a little better, let me ask you all a question. So when you're at work or at school or anywhere, or in any part in our lives, we all have a boss or an authority figure, right? Can you think of anything that your teacher or your boss or anything that wears or has that says instantly without having to say it, I'm in charge, I'm an authority figure? Can y'all think of anything like that? It says, I'm in charge, I'm an authority figure, even though it might not be literally used for something. A badge, great example. A special hat, very good. Oh, coach carries a whistle. I love that one. Absolutely. Absolutely. Good rank insignia, good. Absolutely. Well, one example I always think of is, if you think about a courtroom and a judge, right? A judge has their gavel, and they have a little hammer, right? Is that hammer being swung around a courtroom, literally hitting people? No, of course not, right? But it's hammered still, but it's symbolic. When a judge bangs their gavel down to pass a sentence, they're exercising their symbolic authority in the form of that gavel. And that is how the sword is used by officers during the Civil War. Because during Civil War combat, if you're a soldier, you're an enlisted soldier, you have to listen to orders to execute the Army's mission. You have to understand what's going on. And Civil War combat, if you've been following Civil War week, some of our battle briefs, goodness, Civil War combat is so loud and confusing and filled with smoke and all sorts of things like that. Again, this is not good. Not good, because you're not going to be able to hear and understand anything that's going on. And plus, your buddies and your friends are dying right next to you. This is a recipe for disaster. So the officer, and there's no megaphones, there's no electronics. The officer has to have some way to instruct his men in the field. So that is how the sword is used. Because if you see you're a Civil War soldier and you see your officer in the field with their sword raised and they say forward, forward, and they're saying things like that, you understand that. And you understand what they're trying to say without them having to say it. And furthermore, you have your officer who's been with you this entire time, who's your leader, who's inspiring. If you see them being brave with their sword at the front, it might make you want to be brave too. So it's used to boost morale as well. All of this in one tool, okay? So perhaps at least my favorite example, one of my favorite stories from the Civil War, I think a really great example of it comes from the 54th Massachusetts and Colonel Robert Gould Shaw. If anyone has seen the movie Glory, this is them, okay? So Robert Gould Shaw, again, 54th Massachusetts, 54th United States color. They're a unit of United States colored troops. And so again, they're actually going to be activated in 1863, and they're going to go into battle on July 18th, 1863, at the Battle of Fort Wagner, the Second Battle of Fort Wagner. This is a fort outside of Charleston, South Carolina, same place, same location where Fort Sumter is. And the Army's trying to take this fort. And the 54th, they're leading this attack. They're the first ones in. As the 600 men approach the fort, you can see Shaw right over here. As the 600 men approach the fort, the enemy inside is going to open fire on them. And dozens of them are going to start falling, killed and wounded right there. I'd be unnerved if I saw this and I'm approaching a fort. And so there's actually a lull. And there's a lull in the assault, and they kind of gather up before the parapet before they go on. And they're not quite sure if the assault's really going to push through. And that is when Colonel Robert Gould Shaw does what any leader should do in any organization. And then he leads by example. He raises his sword and shouts, "Forward, 54th, forward." Those are his last words. Because he reaches the top of the parapet, as you see here, he's struck by enemy fire and killed almost instantly. But it works. His men follow his example. They're inspired by his example, and they surge forward into this fort. They take heavy casualties, but they're brave, and they go on. They surge into this fort. They tie down these Confederate defenders to buy time for other Union units to attack, other soldiers to attack other units. And although this battle is a defeat for the Union, the 54th Massachusetts performed extremely valiantly and extremely effectively. So again, that's all due to the bravery, individual bravery of the men, but also to Shaw's example of his leadership. Okay, so the sword, again, it's a high-tech war, a lot of high-tech technological innovations, but some things are universal human truths. Bravery, leading by example, and a sword as a symbol of your authority. That's going to stay the same regardless of the conflict or the technological era and the technological advancements of the era. So just something to think about as we talk about this high-tech soldier. Okay. I think that's just about all the time we have right now for today. So at that, I just wanted to wrap up before we get to some questions. Again, Civil War soldiers fight to accomplish the Army's objective during the Civil War. And spoiler alert, by the way, does anyone know who won the Civil War? Of course, we all do, right? The Union won. So the Army soldiers not only had to execute the Army's mission, they successfully executed the Army's mission. So this worked. This weapon system and this load works to allow soldiers to not only fight in the Civil War, but to win in the Civil War. So again, and often these tools they're using are very technologically advanced for the time period. And I think that's something that we need to think about as we look into the past and study the Civil War and are interested in the Civil War, is that, again, not to take the past on our terms of technological advancement, but for their terms of technological advancement, and what they're using is indeed technologically advanced. And then just three questions I have for y'all before I get to your questions. Just three things to think about. What was the primary or central cause of the Civil War? How did technological innovations influence how soldiers fought the Civil War? And did technological innovations make life easier or harder for Civil War soldiers? And at that, I have here some further publications if anyone is interested. Many of these are great books. I highly recommend them. They relate to things I spoke about today, but they also importantly get to things I didn't have time to reach. And so I highly recommend these publications. All these authors are absolutely excellent. And again, I could not recommend them highly enough. Some are new, some are a little older. So I hope you consider these publications for further reading. And at that, let's see, do we have any further questions? We have some time for a few questions. Absolutely.
All right, AJ, it looks like you do have some questions coming in.
Awesome.
One of the questions is, where did all the supplies get provisioned from? And how did the South get prepped as fast as the North?
Well, if you're talking about supplies for the North, I am not an expert on this, but I do know a little bit about this. It's actually going to be a really decentralized process of procuring equipment. Most regiments, these are often these people that are joining these regiments, these enlisted soldiers, actually have a little bit of money usually. We usually think of them as dirt poor. Many of them are not. Many of them are quite wealthy, and they come together and they pool their wealth, and they actually are going to procure a lot of this equipment themselves. But the Army and the Ordnance Department, like the Army and they're actually the departments at the time, there is going to be an effort to produce some of these maybe harder to procure items like gun blankets. I know like 1.8 million gun blankets were made during the Civil War. It's one of the most valuable things people could have. So you're going to have a mix basically of the government contracting companies to provide supplies for the troops, and then you're going to have a mix of troops going out on their own and getting things, especially like their uniforms and stuff like that they're going to be going to give them. And then the second part involved, how did the South get supplied as fast? Is that I think we have this way of thinking about the Civil War. When we think about the South, we think of them as so outgunned and outsupplied, and I think there is a lot of truth to that as far as their industrial capacity. But as far as how it went to their performance on the battlefield, I'd be hard pressed to find like a Civil War battle, except until maybe near the end of the war, where a large Southern army is utterly routed and defeated by the Union because they just don't have the supplies. Don't take me a gospel truth for that. I'm sure there are some engagements, but the Confederates don't really have a supply problem. It's going to be very similar for them. However, what the big difference is going to be their uniforms early on is that the Southerners are going to have to wear pretty much whatever they have, whereas the Union has a much more organized, textile industry in the North, like textile factories. Even though the South is growing most cotton, there's a lot of textile facilities in the North, so they have a more industrial capacity. That's an advantage for them to produce a standard uniform for their men, whereas the South are not. They're pretty much going to have to wear whatever they have. And by near the end of the war, they might have some standard uniforms, but early on, especially, it's going to be really decentralized. So I hope that spoke to your question.
Great, thank you. There's one more question. Well, there's a few more questions.
Sure.
So how were the uniforms and shoes sized to fit? And then also, where were the shoes made? If you know.
I'm not 100% sure where shoes were made. I don't know if the Army had a big depot or anything, but you might be able to speak to to local businesses or something like that to procure contracts, but there's no centralized location I know of, but it's going to be various industries in the North basically producing these. And I'm sorry, what was the second part of the question, or the first part?
It was where were they made? Where were the shoes made, or how were they sized to fit? Or
how were they sized to fit? Or they weren't. They weren't pretty much. Is that you would have these shoes, and again, I'm not an expert on this, so I'm a little fuzzy on the details, but I'm pretty sure that they were not sized to fit at all. They would make shoes of various sizes, and you would get them, and you'd have to look at them and be like, oh, okay, I guess this one kind of looks like it fits me. This one kind of looks like it fits me, and then good luck, go from there, but they're not really doing that. They're not really sizing it. If you're an officer, yeah, you're absolutely going to have equipment that fits, no doubt. But for the enlisted soldier, it just doesn't exist, to my knowledge.
All right, so in the years between the Revolutionary War and the Civil War, what do you think was the most important innovation or improvement in weaponry, soldiers' equipment, etc.?
Wow. That's a big question. I could go on for a long time about that, probably. I'm butting up against a lot of debates here in the historiography on the Civil War, but if you're asking for my opinion, even though I do not give as much credence to it being a gigantic revolution in warfare as others do, the Minet ball and the rifled musket are quite a leap in technology. It does influence how Civil War combat occurs. It does make it deadlier. It eliminates the cavalry as a sort of battlefield flanking unit to follow up assaults that it's going to be almost impossible to do with rifled muskets. It's going to relegate cavalry to flanking roles and scouting roles mostly. You're not going to have the cavalry arm as a big arm of the battlefield during the Civil War. So again, if we're talking about that, it's eliminating a whole arm of combat that was used at the time. The rifle musket, it's almost doubling the effective range of it, and it's going to make defensive positions harder to carry and to take. So that is probably the most influential one is the Minet ball, for sure. The Minet ball and just rifled muskets in general. That's going to influence how they're fighting the most.
Thank you for giving us your opinion. Another question we have is, did soldiers carry all of the stuff into battle, or did they leave the backpack in camp before marching to the battlefield? I've heard that some were loaded into wagons to carry the stuff.
I've heard the same thing, actually. In my research, I've come across a few accounts of soldiers remarking that they would actually, instead of the knapsack was despised. Actually, that's something I didn't get to. I mentioned it was uncomfortable, but it was very, very uncomfortable. So yes, going into battle, you do not want to carry your knapsack. You don't need it. You're going to leave that behind in camp, or even more ideally, you're going to leave that with your wagon train. You're going to leave that in the wagon so it'll travel with you. And I've even seen a few accounts from some soldiers. We found some in our research that involved a soldier, that he's like, I just left my knapsack behind. We were going on a campaign. All I brought with me was my gun blanket and then rations for 3 days rolled up in the gun blanket. And that's all they had because they didn't want to carry all that stuff with them. So yes, I've seen the same things. They would not want to go in battle with a knapsack. If they were, it was not going to be on purpose. If they know they're going into battle, they're going to be leaving their knapsack and the bulky items behind and just carrying maybe probably some food, their water, things like they need to basically survive and things they need to fight in the field.
Thank you. And I know we are pushing up on the end of our time, but we have so many questions coming in. So I'll ask
Please.
one more.
Absolutely.
And there seems to be so much interest in shoes. So I thought I would end on one of those.
Sure.
One question we had is, did anyone invent new shoes during the conflict?
Not during the conflict, not to my knowledge. It's mostly going to be the Brogans. That's going to be the most common shoe of the war. I'm not sure. There may have been something on a smaller scale. I'm not a shoe expert on the Civil War by any means, so I could be wrong. I'm open to being wrong always. But I do not know of any innovations in shoes, large scale, that's going to affect like what the average soldier is going to be having with them during the Civil War. But I imagine it could have occurred on a small scale. And certainly, again, as I said, for officers, that's going to be mostly that. And you're not going to get shoes that are the same size until after the war. You're going to see that innovation.
Great. Well, thank you so much, AJ, for this program. And thank you everyone who is attending today. It was so great to have so many people joining us on a Wednesday morning. And we look forward to seeing you again this evening for our program tonight at 7 p.m. For Civil War Week, and you can register for that on our website. We also had a number of comments in the chat asking about how they could reserve this program for a class. And you can do that also by visiting our website under the Student Educators section for virtual field trips. You can see what we have to offer. This is just one of many virtual field trip offerings that we have that you can sign up for. Is there anything else, AJ, that you'd like to mention?
No, again, I highly recommend attending all of our other Civil War Week excellent programming. We have an excellent book talk tonight from Christian Keller. Again, so I'd highly, highly recommend that book talk and attending tonight if you're interested in this kind of stuff. And then we also have a teacher workshop tomorrow. So if you're interested in the teacher stuff, that'll be at 4 o'clock. We'll have a teacher workshop. So that is, I know that's another great presentation we're offering. And I'd just like to thank everyone for attending so much. And I'd love to do it again sometime. So y'all have a great one. Thank you.